Hey, church family, thanks for joining us for today's daily devotional. This week we're talking about overcoming worry. Brother Brent kicked us off yesterday looking at Matthew chapter 6 at verse 25, and we're going to pick right up where he left off yesterday, looking at verses 26 and verses 27, where it reads, "Consider the birds of the sky. They don't sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you worth more than they? Can any of you add one moment to his lifespan by worrying?" This passage, this verse, these sayings that Jesus offers us come by way of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is teaching outside. It's very likely that as he is talking about the birds of the sky, he's looking and he's pointing and saying, "Look at the birds of the sky. Look at what they're doing." And they don't mean nearly as much to God as we mean to God. We are his creation that he called good. He called them good, but he called us very good. He breathed his own life into us, and look at them. They continue to live, and God continues to provide for them as they do what God intended for them to do. And there's a lot of truth in that for us as well. God is going to continue to provide for us as long as we are doing what we are intended to do, what God called us to do. God called us to bring him glory. God called us to be discipled. God called us to make disciples, to live under his lordship. And as long as we fulfill the calling that he has put on our life, he's going to continue to provide for us. That doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect, that we're going to be rich, that we're going to have our fill of anything and everything that we could ever want. That's not what Jesus is saying here. What Jesus is saying is he's going to provide what we need. And what we need is really dependent on what he decides that we need. And so we need to trust him. And instead of trying to figure out how to make it from one day to the next, although we should be responsible, we also need to just fulfill the calling that God has placed on our lives and trust him for everything else. And he will provide what he decides that we need. Our author gives us a couple of questions that we can look at here. The first says, with the time you have in a day, how much of it is spent doing the things you know you should be doing? How much of your time is spent doing what you know God has called you to do versus worrying about other things that you think you should do, or wasting time doing things that God has not called you to do? And the second question, how can we know that God will provide for our needs? And that is such an important question. It's a question that instead of me just letting you answer on your own, I kind of want to offer something up to us. I think we know he'll provide for our needs for a couple of reasons. One, he says he will. It's a promise that he will give us what we need, again, and that need is decided by him. He may desire for us to go home to be with him, and so then in that moment, that's our need. He also may desire that we continue to flourish where we are, and he'll provide for that need. And so he promises that he will, and that's one reason that we know he can provide. And I think another reason why we know he can provide is we can look at the history of the Bible and the history of our own lives. We can look and we can see how God provided for others and how God has provided for us in the past. And as we look back, we can then look forward knowing that he will continue to provide everything that we need. My hope is that you will trust him in that you'll trust that he's going to give you exactly what it is that you need. And not be filled with worry about what you think that you need. Instead, just trusting him for it. As you do that, church family, I want you to know that we love you and we're praying for you.